This video is dedicated to the horror community on YouTube, to all of its dedicated fans, and to all of the hardworking content creators who have kept it alive. The following stories are considered to be classics on the Let's Not Meet subreddit, and have been told on numerous channels in the early days of true horror narration. Today we remember and appreciate our roots, and to once again be terrified by these true scary stories.
Number 1.
In the mid-1980s, my mom was a cleaner in Australia. She would do houses in suburban areas, and sometimes would go out to houses in rural or wine areas. We lived near both. She would leave business cards at the local shops, and she got most of her business that way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking Mom to clean her old farmhouse. She made lots of odd demands, and Mom would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet Mom, and said that she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mom agreed, mainly because this lady was quite obviously wealthy, and was offering to pay Mom substantially more than she would expect. Mom went to the house on a Monday morning, and said that she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the cleaning, she hears the back door shut. Mom was told that no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 3 to 4 minutes. Although she said it could have been much longer, there was no other car on the property. She wanted to leave immediately but had 2 more rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed that she heard nothing else. She decided that perhaps it was nothing, or perhaps something had fallen, and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mom got closer, she realized that the photos were all of her. Some were taken at her family home, and many others were taken at houses Mom would clean, some through windows or over fences. She used the house phone to call the police, and immediately drove to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated, but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped with their searching, and we ended up moving to a new town 4 months later. Every time Mom tells me the story, I get serious chills. My mom thinks that the lady had something to do with it, but why? And for what purpose?
Number 2.
The following story is told from the point of view of a female. I am 22 and this incident happened a 1.5 years ago. I had just moved into my first apartment. The door that led to my apartment locks itself automatically when closed, so I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail, while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail and using the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person under my bed was lying still, with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. He didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts were rushing through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just gonna take a shower and call you back." The bathroom was right next to my bed, so I quickly walked in, quietly locked the door, and turned the shower on. My apartment was on the first floor, so I jumped out of my window and then called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go across the street and see if anyone comes out of the door to the apartment complex. This was during the summer, and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car, while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend, and he came to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that stood beside me while the other cops searched through my house told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives and was waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door, and while I was getting my mail, hid under the bed. The man was trying to hurt me and turned out to be a homeless person and ended up being placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. I wanted to share my story so that others might know what to do if they find themselves in a situation like this. The police told me that what I did was truly amazing and rational, and if I screamed, this could have ended really badly for me.
Number 3.
This is a popular story with my family and most of my friends. Amanda is my brother's girlfriend, and at the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together just yet, since they had only been dating for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled, "Roommate Wanted, Females Only." This sort of thing was common, since the area that she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that was not comfortable living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into this place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by around 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there was a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkept. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door, an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks that she's at the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out and that he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. There was no furniture. There was nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord would not open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walk down the hallway and into the living room, she notices that the front door has a plank nailed across it. Amanda's creepometer had started dinging, so she decides to wrap things up, but trying to be polite. As she's telling the guy, "Thanks for showing me around," he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement, that it was recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and that she should take a look down there. Amanda and the landlord are standing in a small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward, creating a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles and motions to the stairs and says,
"Ladies first."
What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda got a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah? Are you here? I'll come out from around back and let you in. It's great. You have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself around the landlord and walks out of the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told my mother and my brother everything. The cops were called. They took her statement and went to investigate. The Craigslist ad had been removed. The house had been foreclosed upon over 6 months earlier. and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room that the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of old dirty blankets, rotten food, and empty gasoline jugs everywhere. What was even more creepy was that he had plastered ripped up pages from porno magazines on all the walls in the room. The really scary part was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty except for another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped up in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. Needless to say, Amanda ended up not moving in.
Number 4.
About 5 years ago, I lived in a major city in the United States. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go on long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to be afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but that all changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning. I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was on most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street on my side was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me, deciding he was probably drunk. I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still, until I could make out his face. His eyes were wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back, and then stopped dead in my tracks. He stopped dancing, and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but still looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about a half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing. He was gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved very fast. I was shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him, and then he started moving towards me again. He took giant exaggerated tiptoed steps, as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone, except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point that I ran away, or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone, or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the hell do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. But what came out was a whimper. What the Regardless whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react at all. He just stood there, smiling. After what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away, just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go, until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side road, and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 more months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk. He didn't look high. He looked completely and utterly insane, and that's a very, very scary thing to see.
Number 5.
A week or so before my 10th birthday, I walked to the corner store with a $5 bill and picked up a jar of ragu for my mom. On my way home, a man that I had never seen before fell in step with me and began talking. "Hi," he said, cheerfully. "My name is Dr. Ramsey. I'm a pediatrician. Do you know what a pediatrician is?" I walked along silently, not replying, and fervently hoping he would take that as a sign that he should leave me alone. Subtleties were not his strong suit though, because he kept right on chattering. "Are your parents looking for a pediatrician for you? Of course, you're almost a big girl now. You'll be needing another kind of doctor soon, won't you? That's okay though. They can still bring you to me till then. What's your name? You have beautiful hair. I was just on my way to get some suckers for the candy jar in my office. Do you like suckers?" Thankfully, we were nearing my house, so I ran forward, up the back steps, and through the kitchen door. I didn't know it then, but this was the beginning of a very long, very scary ordeal. It didn't take long after that for Dr. Ramsey to begin showing up. At first, it seemed benign enough, at least to a kid. He would drive by my house every day, smiling and waving. I told my mom, who said maybe it was on his way home from work. But then, the phone calls began. My dad called me into the living room and sat me down. He asked me about the day Dr. Ramsey followed me home, and if I talked to him. He said I was not in trouble, but I needed to tell him the truth. I told him no, and he asked me if I was sure, and if I could be forgetting something. I told him no again, and he frowned. "Then how does he know your name?" I honestly didn't know. It turns out that was not all he knew. He knew my sister's name as well. Pretty soon, neither my sister nor I were allowed to answer the phone. He called several times a day. At first, neither of us knew what he was saying. Then one night, one of my brothers told me that he was telling my parents he wanted to hurt me, and later, my sister. Things got complicated after that. My dad called the police, but as this was before there were any stalking laws, there was not much they could do. They told my parents to call back if he tried anything. My dad then called a friend of his from back in the day, who happened to be a cop. For the next month, my dad's friend escorted me to and from school. Suddenly, life as I knew it came to a screeching halt. I couldn't walk alone. I couldn't play outside. I couldn't even walk to the convenience store down the road. When access to me was completely denied, that's when things escalated. It was around this time he began threatening my sister as well. Then one afternoon my sister, 2 of my brothers, and my mother were in the kitchen. One of my brothers saw a glimpse of someone in the garage. Dr. Ramsey came bolting out of the garage, my brothers chasing after him. They ran all the way to the park by my house, where they lost him in the trees. My parents called the police again, but again, nothing came of it. The only information they had was a description and a name that was almost certainly fake. A couple of weeks later, We woke to find our dog hanging from the side porch. She was a gorgeous saddle black German Shepherd, born the same day I was. We were devastated. The cops were called, but they claimed that there was no evidence that it was him, and ruled it accidental. But none of us believed that. His phone calls became more informative in the meantime. He would talk about who was home and who wasn't. If my brother would try to say my dad was home, he would tell him who really was in the house. He also would talk about the house itself, about how the window in the kitchen could easily be opened with a knife from the outside, even if it was locked, and about how the French doors that connected the living room to the side porch, and how the lock could be finagled from the outside if you jiggled it just right. That night, my dad put some carpenter nails at the bottom of the French doors until he could get a new lock ordered. My parents had to go to a company event for my dad's work. My older brothers were at the skating rink, and my sister was on the phone with her best friend. My little brother was on the floor asleep. I was watching Devo on the midnight special with Wolfman Jack. It was late. Suddenly, the top of the French door swung inward, and in the few milliseconds before the nails in the bottom caused them to snap back, I could see the silhouette of Dr. Ramsey standing on the other side of the door. My sister and I ran upstairs, but about halfway up, we realized that our little brother was still asleep on the living room floor. As quietly as we could, we slipped back down the stairs to get him. We all went into our bedroom and didn't turn on the light. This way we could see outside. We watched out the window for a while. When we didn't find him, we crept down the hall to our brother's room to look. We looked down and could see someone standing at the back door. He knocked very loudly. "What do you want?" my sister asked out the window. He stepped back and said, "I have a pizza delivery. Can you come to the door?" She scoffed at him, declaring that she was not stupid and that she could see that he didn't have a pizza, and she would be calling the cops. He left after hearing that. A short while later, my brothers returned home. We told them what happened, and they walked around the yard, trying to find any signs of Dr. Ramsey. They came back in, and things settled down. By now, we had pretty much given up on calling the cops because it never helped, so we just went back in. Each of us, except my youngest brother who was still asleep, was carrying a knife from the kitchen, just in case. Eventually, one of my brothers went into the kitchen to grab a bowl of cereal as a snack. You know that sensation you get when you feel someone is watching you? Well, he had that in spades. He kept looking around the kitchen, through the doorway into the dining room, at the windows, but he didn't see anything. However, he could still feel eyes on him. So he went closer to the door to try to see better. The kitchen lights were reflecting on the windows of the door, so he couldn't see clearly through it. He stepped closer, then closer again, until he was right up on the door. He cupped his hands on either side of his head so he could see. There on the other side of the window pane was Dr. Ramsey, smiling back at him. He turned to yell for my older brothers, and when he looked back again, he was gone. They went out again to look for him, but again, they didn't find him. The next night, we were at the table playing Crazy Eights, and my brother was restless. My sister asked him what was wrong, and he said that he felt like any minute there would be a loud bang on a door or a window. Almost immediately after he finished his sentence, there were 3 loud bangs on the window right behind him. In the chaos, my 2 older brothers ran out, but the culprit was already gone. A couple of weeks later, I was at school and we were outside on the playground during recess. I was swinging upside down when I saw the now familiar blue Ford Galaxy cruising by very slowly. There he was, smiling and waving. He called my name, and I ran to the teacher and told her. The school had already been told all about him, and she took me inside right away and called my mom. That same day, my mom had gotten a call from the school office asking her to verify that my dad was picking me up, as he had called to say that he was on his way. He wasn't. Not long after that, I woke up one night thirsty. I went down to the kitchen for a drink, and there, sitting alone in the dark, was my dad. On the table was a gun. He was tired of the police waiting until Dr. Ramsey tried something. He was tired of his children being terrorized. He was tired of being afraid every time he left for work that something would happen while he was gone. I sat with him for a time, watching, before he sent me back to bed. These events and many more took place over a period of 18 months. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. He had vanished from our lives. The phone calls, the drive-by with the creepy waves, everything. For a long time, during and after the Dr. Ramsey days, I would have this reoccurring nightmare in which I would wake up to find Dr. Ramsey standing at the foot of my bed. It took a long time before I felt like a kid again. I found out years later that when he was calling, Dr. Ramsey would tell my parents about the awful things he wanted to do to me, and there was nothing they could do about it. I don't know what happened to him when he disappeared. I don't know if he was in a car wreck, locked up in prison, or in a coma, but sometimes I wonder if the wait ended for my dad when he was sitting in the darkened kitchen that night. I don't know, and I'm not sure I want to.
There's always a reason to be afraid.